name's Nicky Naylor. I'm Nicky
Basically,
Naylor.
to make the boys tenon and take them and place it on here.
Then we get the hydrochloric acid.
Liverpool Institute. Last time I was here, I was little. I was sort of down here, and it all looked much bigger. All these things were up, all these people who went to Oxford, all the lists and all of that. Over here, this was the hall. This was where the secretaries and all those people were in the mornings. So I think the last time I sort of remember, it was like all millions of kids all buzzing around, and prefects and masters in gowns and things. This was the bit where you used to enter only if you were like very important, a prefect or something like that. Otherwise, you had to come in round the side. So that's where the hall is, with the famous school motto, non nobis solum sed toti mundo nati. Not for ourselves, but for the whole world where we born. This is where they used to have all the notice boards here. So you'd if you had, like, if you were in the Geographical Society or the Nature Society or all that, they'd put all the notices up there, so you'd come around here in the morning and see if there's anything interesting. Downstairs is where you used to go to eat. So when I was 11, I came here in what they used to call the third form, because it had been a public school. They started kids at 9, I think, so 11-year-olds would have been in the third form. But that was when we started, very little and very innocent. I'm very overawed by this huge Victorian building that Charles Dickens once talked at. That used to be the science laboratory with like a big lecture, big wooden lecture things going back. It's great. And in fact, that was where we used to have our bird watching. This is into the hall. So this is where I used to come in the mornings. Should go this way. This is playground. We used to come up here. This is from here, from the playground. Come in here. And that was the headmaster's office. Thank you, sir. He was called the Baz. He was quite friendly, actually. By the time I left the school, he seemed like quite a nice fellow. First, he was very overpowering and frightening. This was our first classroom here. This one, 3C. Here we are. So this is the very first classroom I ever came to here. This was 3C. This was Miss Inkley's class, and she taught Spanish, and she would teach from up here. Now, boys, Miss Inkley. And she said, you can call me sir if you want. Something I never quite worked out. Anyway, she used to have a lot of very thick makeup on. And they used to say that it was because she had scars from the war. She'd been something in the war. So this is Miss Inkley, 3C. Quite some memories. Through the ruins, we pick our way. And this was into the hall for assembly. The organ's still here. I was wondering if it was. We go straight down here. There's a little bit of a dip now. And we're now on the famous stage that I don't think I've hardly ever been on. Such hallowed ground. The teachers used to come in from the back there. Very dramatic. The headmaster and all that was here. And all those 1,000 boys were all seated here. First of all, we used to be up there, 3C. That was one of his places there. I remember reading these little books they used to give it called the Green Book, in which everybody's name from the school, they had everybody's name. So you could look up anyone. If you met someone who sort of say his name is Davis or something, you could look him up. They say, Davis, 3B. And it would tell you, like, any clubs he belonged to. You think, oh, he's interesting. It's very handy, like an early filofax, that was. I think it gave you a great feeling of the world was out there to be conquered, that the world was a very big place, and somehow you could reach it from here. Because I say a lot of the kids went to Oxford and Cambridge and everywhere. It's all in a terrible state of repair now. You've got all little old drawers and stuff, beautifully made little pieces. It's a good drum. And so this is it. We'd sit around here, and a teacher would sit at the end of the pew, you know, so keep the boys in line. And this was it, basically. My early life in Liverpool. spent, a lot of it, in this very place, from 9 till 4 in the evening. Good morning, boys. This morning. There you go, then. All right, stage of the Institute, where I once performed in St. Joan by Bernard Shaw. I was one of the monks, and I had long hair, and I came on from this side, entered, and all the guys who knew me sort of giggled, you know, because the long hair. I mean, he was probably shorter than this, really, but at the time, you know, it was scandalous. This is a point where we go down. So say in the mornings we were going after assembly, I'm going to go to your first class, and say it was history. And I'd come down this corridor and to Cliff Edge's room, Mr. Edge, who taught history. He was a good lad. He was generally liked by people. And so you'd have to find your way. And I mean, when you were 11, the very first sort of year I ever came here, it was difficult to just find your way around this place. You had to hang out with your mates and say, where are we going next, you know? And one of them might know where it was. So this is the place. My main memory about this was, this is exactly as it was. But this was a place where we came at the end of term one time, and we were allowed to bring our guitars in on the last day. So this was when we were here and we were established, you know, we weren't quite so young now, we knew our way around. Remember me and George coming in here with the guitars. I think I stood on a desk and did Tutti Frutti. Oh, wouldn't hold me now. Oh, yes, it would. And all the guys would be, that's it. Oh, all right. Oh, I don't know. This is it. And Cliff Edge would be up here. It is the desk where it used to be. That'd be his old desk. It's the teacher's desk. And he was a tall fellow and, say, quite a nice fellow. He'd have his big, long black gown on, teaching history. I remember I used to sit down there somewhere near the front, I think so he could keep his eye on me. And I remember drawing a glamorous lady on the cover of my history book. Which didn't go down too well, except with the other boys, who then asked me if I could draw one on their books. So I became the class pornographer. At a very early age. It was all harmless stuff, though, believe me. Up to the science laboratory, up on the top floor here, I think, where we used to have a teacher called Joe Schofield, Mr. Schofield, and chemistry lecture room, yeah, here. And he once did this experiment where it blew up on him. Well, boys, here we are. Experiment here. Me and Jackson, my mate, used to sit here. In fact, maybe here. Because when his explosion happened over there, I saw what he was doing. It looked a little bit funny. He said to me about it, and now we get the hydrochloric acid. He went and he picked up the sulfuric. He said, and we put it in. All right, I said, hello, he's got the wrong one. Mix it. Joe Sco, blown up. Off he went to hospital, but it was just a few cuts, no problem. Now, this is where Nicky Naylor used to hold court. He was a little science teacher, a short man. We had a bit of a limp. And we all used to work around here on these Bunsen burners and things like that. And one day, the whole class was in here. You know, you'd have one boy there, one boy there, one boy there. We were all supposed to be working, and Nicky Naylor left us with some job to do, and he said, get on with that, you know. Well, and he went out there, he said, now behave yourselves and all that. And I used to mimic him. In fact, I still do. Because he used to walk around like he said, my name's Nicky Naylor. I'm Nicky Naylor. And I was going around the class doing this, you know, supposed to be working. And in the middle of my act here, I'm going, I'm Nicky Naylor. My name's Nicky Naylor. And he walked in up there. He says, so's mine. Let's go and see the headmaster. Come on. And so that was me and him off to the baths. For me to be caned. No, I don't think I got caned for that one. But I have been caned. Used to cane you in the headmaster's office if you were really bad. It was mainly when I was in the younger years. Later, they didn't seem to do it so much. They cane you with wooden bamboo thing across here. And the problem was if it got you here, because that used to leave wheels, that used to hurt. But one day, in fact, George Harrison, who used to go to this school too, got caned. As we did once or twice, you know, generally for just sort of messing around and talking in class, nothing deadly. But George got caned, and he went home and he was sitting at dinner and having something to eat, and his dad noticed this wheel here, and he said, "What was that?" He said, "Oh, I got caned today," and Dad got annoyed, you know. So the next day at school, the teacher who caned George was called out, and Mr. Harrison to see him. He said, "Are you the teacher that caned my son?" He said, "Well, yes, I am." And smack! And he laid him out. George's dad laid him out. He's the hero of the entire school forever, to this very day. Here you've got all the boards here, the honours. What have we got? All sorts of things. Indian Police Commission. Assistant Keeper, Victoria and Albert Museum. Scholar Classics. They used to give a really good education here, you know, so that the kids, this is going back to 1930, well, going back to 1901 and 02. The school bell used to be here somewhere, and you were always tempted to ring it. We weren't allowed to. This is Stan Reed's art class. And this is a great place. This was where you could stay a bit late and do drawing and stuff. And I used to be interested in art, and I used to like Stan a lot because he was quite a sort of easygoing fella. And the people at the council, Liverpool Council, sort of were involved in closing this school down. One of the fellas who was big in the council was Derek Hatton. And when I met him, he said, "You don't remember me, do you?" He said, "You used to stay late in Stan Reed's art class, didn't you?" "Yeah, and I used to sit over here somewhere. And you'd draw, you know, and do bits and pieces." He said, "Well, when you used to stay late and do the art," he said, "I was the little kid in detention. So this fellow who'd closed down this school was really just a little kid over here in the short pants in detention." And it's pretty hard to get detention off Stan Reed because he was quite an easygoing bloke, as I say. And this is the big staircase that goes down to the hall downstairs if you're going down. And at one point I had a piece of art in the art competition, the school art competition. And it used to sort of hang somewhere there. I was very proud of it. Of course, all the memories for me here are not in this ruinous state. In fact, I'm not really seeing it like that. I'm kind of seeing it with, you know, my art poster up here. Grime doesn't pay, I think it was. And I'm seeing it with millions of kids just running up and down these stairs, you know, as if it's in the old days. This was the secretary's office there, and there was a kind of youngish girl, you know, who was, I think, fancied by every boy in the whole school. You come right down, this is the dining room. And down here was where everyone used to queue. Massive, big, long queue along here. And you'd queue up with your little dinner tickets, and the master would be standing right here, and you'd give him your dinner ticket. And he'd collect them in a great big wad of tickets. And you'd come in, and the queue sometimes used to wind round here. It was so long. And there's a double back here. And you'd go in that door, get your meal, come out that door with you've been served in there. So we were along here, and this is now a quite modern boiler compared to what used to be. It used to be a sort of old iron stove there kind of thing. And one day the teacher came in here, and he'd collected a great big wad of these dinner tickets that you used to pay, I don't know, a shilling for or something. And he got a great big wad of them, and he came in, and he used to put them on the fire here, give him a little poke with a poker, then go back and collect another great big wad. And we were queuing here, so one day he came and he put them on the fire. But there was a kind of wet coal on the fire, and it didn't burn up instantly. So what happened was all these dinner tickets were still in there, and we were standing here. This was money. These were banknotes. So I must admit, we reached in and got pockets full of these. So And then we went home and rubbed the ones that were in pencil off and resold them to our friends. Mind you, a lot of friends wouldn't do it because they said, I mean, they're going to notice second-hand tickets and everything. So it wasn't that good a scam after all. And this is where there was lots of tables and benches in here, a bit like sort of Oliver Twist. Lots of wooden tables and benches. And over here in this corner, I remember once I was eating over here. You'd bring your plates with your main dinner and your pudding. And I was coming over here, and there was a table here. And I sat down here and I was eating. And, in the general way of things, I mean, I suppose I must have been shouting or something. I didn't mean to, generally. I'd only been drumming on the table or something, but it wasn't really allowed. And the head boy came over. I think he was a fellow called Holt. Blonde hair, rather sort of distinguished, and he had his gown on. He came over here, and he said, "Oh, McCartney, you stop all this sort of stuff. Come on now, behave yourself, really. Set an example, so and so." And I was sitting here. I said, "Oh, sorry, sorry." And so he comes back here, he said, "Oh, you just, stop messing around." Bang! And he turns into this smack. Boom! He hits his head, and he's got to keep his composure. Through the doors. I remember standing here once, some mate of mine, Evans, I think his name was, and he said, "Have you ever been butted?" I said, "No." He said, "What's it like?" He said, "Boop!" Like that. He put me on the floor. Funny what you remember, really, isn't it? Bang. So this is the way to the woodwork room, where my memory is of the smell, mainly, which was fish glue. And I enjoyed it in here, because you were shown how to use. I wasn't very good at it, I must admit, but you were shown how to use wood and stuff. And nowadays, I enjoy all that.
And basically, to make the mortise and tenon, take the wood and place it on here. With this little beauty here, you get it.
Woodwork, it was really a skive woodwork. It wasn't like a lesson. It was like playing, really. I mean, the main thing for me is it's just such a great building, all of this, and it's great to have the opportunity, aged 11, to be coming around places like this. This was the music room, where I basically never learned anything at all. I used to just sit over here, and the fellow would play sort of Beethoven records and that, and we'd wish he'd say something or tell us something about music or how to do it and stuff, but he just played us stuff that we didn't really like. So I never learned anything about music. Next, down here, Dusty Durbin's English class. No, that's a science lecture, where I remember some woman came to do a lecture from South Africa, and she gave a film show, and she was rather sort of, boys. And we said to her, "But don't you think, calling them boys and treating them like this is a bit denigrating?" She said, no, it's fine and all that. So even then, we were a little bit on South Africa's case. And I've come into the toilet, so fancy a pee, anyone? This used to be Dusty Durbin's room. Mr. Alan Durbin, we used to call him Dusty Durbin, don't know why. And he used to have his stage area over there. He was the English teacher, and I was quite interested in English literature because he got us interested very early on, telling us about the dirty bits in English literature. And we were kind of 16-year-old boys, so he got us interested. And then we got interested in the other bits too, so he's quite a clever bloke. He gave, at this stage, you used to have like 6 weeks to do an essay. And I'd never had that luxury before, ever. I'd always just had to do it in a few days. But having 6 weeks, of course, I didn't do it till the last 2 days or something. And the lecture was all about American humor I was supposed to give. And he called on me, said, "Okay, McCartney, give us your lecture." So I started with a few little hastily put together notes and said, "Well, American humor is funny, and, there's a couple of names." And I said, I said about Stephen Leacock and one of his most famous books, The Bodley Head. And he said, wait a minute, McCartney. He said, you haven't done your homework, have you? He said, The Bodley Head was the name of the publishing house that did the book. I just looked at the cover, Stephen Leacock, Bodley Head. Got it in. Still, he was all right, he forgave me and that. He was a great fella, actually. Really, one of the best teachers I ever had, this fella. And the funny thing is, he would tell you about a translation of something like Chaucer that was too hard to understand. And you could read the English translation kind of thing, And I remember him telling me to do that, and I bought a book that gave the translation. Well, now one of my daughters has just got a similar kind of book that does the same thing, gives a translation of Shakespeare. And lo and behold, it is by Alan Durband, the very man who was in this place. And what used to impress us about him, one of the things used to impress us about him, was that he'd had a story read out on the BBC, Morning Story, something that he'd written. So he was like a bit of a star, Dusty. I remember him asking me when I was sitting right there. I remember him asking up here, what are you going to do, McCartney, when you leave school? And I said, I'm going to be in a group, sir. He said, well, pretty precarious business, I said, yes, sir, but we've been offered £15 a week. Spent my early life in Liverpool. Something I'm not likely to forget. No, people blame the places on faces that I know but never met. Upstairs on the bus sits a man. He's talking to himself, or so it seems, listing names of old comedians and laughing at them. Down the pierhead where the speakers meet, each of them his own imagined crowd, giving us his version of the book God has written. I spent my early life in Liverpool. Something I'm not likely to regret. No, people blend with places, faces that I know I never met. In the street before they built the road, raising jam jars for a worthy cause or two. Prince the dog with one eye to his name wants to follow. I spent my early life in Liverpool. Something I'm not likely to forget. Oh, 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 oh. People blend with faces and places that I know but never met. People blend with places and faces that I know but never met. Walking with the boys of Dungeon Lane, aimlessly towards the cast iron shore, swapping tales about the Chinese farm, getting caught. Swapping tales about the Chinese farm. getting caught. Down the sports field of the Institute lives soft, said the harmless village fool. Greets the kids who pass the other side, saying, hello, children. I spent my life in Liverpool, something I'm not likely to forget. Oh,